but you guys can let me know in the chat if everything is okay. Oh, yeah, there was an update, a Microsoft update on my computer, and it just bamboozled everything. So hopefully now we're back up because we can't be stopped. I will persevere, and if I need to reboot my computer, I'll reboot my computer. So hopefully this is going to work this time. Suzanne, thanks for coming back. Okay, is the sound okay? It's much better right now. I have all green bars all across. It looks good. Could you confirm that for me? That would be awesome. Okay, hey Nicole. So yeah, packed show tonight. We lost 10 minutes for the Microsoft reboot there, but we will keep going. I lost all the things I had saved on my desktop to show you guys, but it's okay. We can do this without it. We don't need it too much. I'm just going to look up one again. But yeah, it looks good. So, okay, perfect. Tonight, I'm going to redo this because my choppy speech from before was barely audible. I heard that you guys heard 20%, 80% was like muffled. So we're going to redo it. So tonight you're going to want to be here because we are going to be talking about the third wave in Ontario. So maybe you're not in Ontario, but you might start hearing about a third wave. And I want to explain what's happening. What's the idea behind the third wave? We're also going to look at when science takes over, when governments take over science. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and it never went well. Spoiler alert, it never went well for anybody. So yeah, we're going to take a look at that. We're going to look at how it is that normal people like you and I get sucked into this whole tyranny and actually become the government enforces, like the boots on the ground, right? We're going to take a look at that. Like, what does it take? How is it that a normal guy sitting at his computer all day can then go and become some kind of an enforcer at night, right? So yeah, we're going to take a look at all that. And of course, we are going to look at our friend Victor, who you guys know because we've been following his life since 1933 now. So you guys know all about Victor. And yeah, it's 1942, which is the year we're in, is our next destination. If we keep going this way, we will be in 1942 by probably the summer. And you're going to see it spill from the summer all the way into the fall into next year, 2022. We are there. So last week when we did 1941, I showed you that what the Germans did, what the Nazis did in 1941 is exactly directly paralleled to what the governments of the world are doing in 2021 to the people, right? Under the banner of COVID and under the banner of medical intervention, right? So the dynamics have changed a little bit. It's the medical is the entry point now, whereas before it was class struggle and things like that, Jews, but now it's actually medicine. Oh, and by the way, here's Kovitsky. You guys remember him? I did a video about him. He is there to remind us that we are descending into a communist-style government pretty much everywhere you are, except if you're maybe in Florida or Texas. But a lot of parts of the world right now are descending into this absolute communist state, and it's like we don't know or we don't realize or we're okay with it. And I don't know, both things scare me. But anyways, so let's get started with that. So hello, Juad, hello, Nicole, I've already seen you, but hello again. I don't know if there's anybody on DLive. I'm supposed to be on DLive too, but I can't have it open yet. But yeah, so who else is your Point Fire? Patrick, hello. Just gonna scroll up a tiny bit. Okay. All right, guys, let's start. So we're gonna start. I'm gonna bring up, I had an article that before my stream got bamboozled when I tried earlier on. It was here, but I'm just gonna look at the third wave Ontario, because I'm gonna explain to you guys what's happening with this. So I'm gonna pick any random expert here, but it's going to be, we're going to look at the CTV News. We're going to pick CTV News because I honestly don't care. They're all corrupt. So hold on. Let's check this out. Share. There we go. Okay. Okay. Here we go. You guys see this? Strict 3-week lockdown needed to stop explosive COVID-19 variant growth, says Ontario. So we had the first lockdown. We had flatten the curve for 2 weeks. And by the way, if you guys know Steven Crowder, he did a anniversary stream this week about that, like the whole year of COVID. It was really funny. I really recommend it if you haven't seen it. Hey Peter, hey Varangian. Okay, so the third lockdown that we're headed to in Ontario, it's probably happening in other places in the world, but here, let's just cover this really quickly, and then I'm going to tell you the idea behind this. So basically, they're saying here that there's a new strain, which is the B117, whatever, new variants, right? Coming, and that is the reason that we're going to need that. So remember, they had those predictions before; they never really came to light, and now they're doing it again. And so they're saying that there's going to be records again. So as the government was reopening, they were, oh yes, the share, sorry, a point fire, I just saw your thing there. Yeah, shot in the dark. If you guys have not seen that video, I'm so sorry, my brain's all over the place. Squirrel brain, ADD brain. Point fire just put in the chat there. Let me see if I can get it pinned in here. Because what it's hold on. Oh, can you put it again in there? I need an assistant. Oh goodness. It's a doctor who explains very clearly. There it is. I'm going to put this here. Okay, this, you have to read this. So thank you, Point Fire, for putting that in the chat. It's, if you go, I don't know if it's the one on YouTube. I know it's on BitChute. But Sherry Tepany, and she's a doctor. She's like she holistic medicine. She looks at everything, so not just like medical, but nutrition and like other ways of healing. So she's very, very smart, and she clearly knows what she's talking about. So anyways, go and look up her how she explains how the vaccine, what it does to you. She explains to you how 2 of the main vaccines, how they enter your body, what causes the allergic reaction, how it kind of cracks open like an egg and binds to the cell. Anyways, go and watch it. It's a fantastic video, and I recommend that everybody who's thinking about getting vaccinated, that you look at that first, just so that you have full information on what's happening. Okay, so yes, they're talking about the third wave in Ontario. They're going to start putting up numbers. So as the government of Ontario was reopening to allow us our freedoms back, there was a delay in getting the vaccine, right? So Canada, Ontario, federal, whoever, it's government. So it was mismanaged from the start. So the vaccine is being delayed, and there's not enough vaccines here to go around for everybody. So what they're doing is they're trying to, they want to avoid people going, okay, wait, we've reopened and I didn't get the vaccine, but I'm going out there because there's no vaccines available, right? So I'm going out there and I'm totally fine. So maybe I won't get the vaccine. That is what the third wave is aiming at killing. It wants to kill the idea that people may have that you will not need the vaccine. They've committed to the vaccine. They're going full force. The vaccine is the only solution, according to the governments, many governments in the world. And they're saying there's a third wave coming, so we need a lockdown, because they want to make sure you don't get out there and realize you don't actually need the vaccine. It wasn't as bad as they said. So staying locked down does a couple of things. You're not going out there and potentially realizing that it's not a true danger if you're under 70 and you don't have super huge comorbidities. So that's what they're doing. They're locking us back in order for them to get enough vaccinations so that then they can say, okay, we're going to open up now, but you need to get a vaccine, right? You want to go on an airplane, you want to go on a restaurant, you want to go on the bus to work, you need a vaccine. And now we have the vaccines available. So that's my opinion based on how I understand propaganda works. And this is what they want to do. So this is why we're talking about a third wave now. Doesn't matter. It's all propaganda. And it's funny that the third wave is in Ontario only, which is one of the places they've had trouble getting vaccines. So it's Yeah, because I think I heard today that Montreal has promised everybody's going to be vaccinated by June 24th. I'm like, well, what if you don't want to get vaccinated? So anyways, okay. So that is it. So beware. I've been telling you guys about the propaganda since the start, but this is just another example of propaganda. Okay, so science. When science is taken over by governments, so the government essentially now has taken over 100% of the management of COVID. So we were already in Canada specifically, we were already in that environment because our medicine is socialist medicine. So there's no private clinic. You have to go to the hospital or normal clinics and you wait like everybody else. And if you want to jump ahead of the line, you have to go to the States. So we're already in socialized medicine. So naturally, the government took over the management of COVID. In the States, it's a little bit different. The government still took over the management, but you guys have some private healthcare down there. So that's essentially the government managing science. And there is no historical precedent where this has gone well. It doesn't exist. Anytime the government has said, we're going to manage anything, it ends up being complete chaos. And it's going to be no different for this. But I do have a few examples for you of when the ideology has taken over the science fields, and then that's what they're using to go forward. So ideally, for science to be true to the scientific method, it needs to be hanging out completely outside of any ideology. So you cannot have any form of science that is tied to any ideology. It doesn't matter what it is, but it cannot be tied to it. But now we've done that. We've tied it. So we're doomed to fail. And this whole thing has already started failing and crumbling. And in order to keep that from crumbling, the government will just come out with more and more and more extreme measures. So third lockdown in order to save the vaccination campaign that they want you all to get. And then it's going to be, if you're not vaccinated, you can't participate in society. Then it's going to be forced vaccinations. Then it's going to be two classes of people in society, which is going to be the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated. And the non-vaccinated will become the new Jews of the 40s in Europe, but because they are going to be persecuted, spat upon, probably rounded up at some point. So this is where the next stop is going to take us. If we don't pay attention and stop the mask wearing, stop the vaccine protest, all those things. If we don't do that, we're headed full force for that kind of thing. So a couple examples, I'll go way back in time, which is to like Renaissance medicine. So you all know I have a degree in history, which I thought was going to be useless until I realized, wait a second, I'm not brainwashed. I can actually pick out these things. So it did come in handy. My degree is from the 90s, so it wasn't completely taken over by communists back then. It still was a little bit, but not completely. So anyways, there was a time where science, specifically anatomy, was completely taken over by religion. So Catholic Church had taken over. And we saw this. So the Catholic Church and the kings were working together on all aspects. And when you looked at anatomy and medicine back then, the government gave the church authority over the doctors. So they put into science the ideology for anatomy, essentially meaning you cannot undress a female patient to observe her. You must do it with her clothes on. So that's an example. You're not allowed to dissect the body after it's dead for scientific research, for example. So those were all things that were happening. And because the church was deliberately standing in the way of scientific achievement, and that happened for centuries. And it's actually my dissertation, my master's degree thing, which I didn't finish, and that's a story for another day. I finished my thesis, but it was about how there was a subclass of surgeons hanging out in the fields. And these surgeons, there were barbers at the same time. There were barber surgeons, and those guys were actually the guys in the fields. So when they introduced firearms with these awful bullets, the bullets would kind of penetrate the body, dragging in clothes and debris and bone and all that. And the doctors who weren't performing any kind of like anatomy at that point weren't helpful in any way. And so the barber surgeons, who were a different category, not even considered anything scientific by the doctors, would go into the fields, and they started to develop techniques for bullet removal. They understood wound cleanliness before the time that we understood bacteria and we could see it and things like that. So they were just in the fields, and they actually developed a higher level of knowledge with regards to trauma, with regards to anatomy and body functionality, spine, like everything, muscles, skeletal, everything. The barber surgeons ended up being the class of actual scientists that superseded the doctors with the medical knowledge at that point. And that is when they finally in the 19th century came together. That is when the profession actually flourished as a whole, the medical profession. Anyways, okay. So that was what my whole thesis proved, was these nobodies hanging out at the barbershop ended up being so much more knowledgeable and far more scientific than anybody else, because these doctors were held back by the church. Okay, perfect. So we're going to speed it up to a communist world. So Comrade Kovitsky here is going to be very proud of me for talking about the communists. The communists were notorious for only taking science that advances the ideology. If it doesn't, too bad. So this is why under communist regimes, you see all sorts of sciences that get banned. So you're not allowed to do like sociology, for example, or philosophy, because they don't want you to think. So those kinds of fields get banned under socialism or communist states. And they'll favor things like weapons development. And so they'll get like the scientists to do that, or whatever it is they need to compete to show that communist is the best thing ever. So that's what they were doing. So there was this one guy, his name was Lysenko. And I remember studying him. He completely bamboozled the wheat production. Like he came up with a theory and made a false promise. So basically he rejected gene theory and genetics. He rejected it flat out. And when he was going up into Stalin's world, he was going up the chain of command. He convinced Stalin that, you know, the wheat was like, it would understand its environment by putting it in a different environment, because it rather than genetically transmitting things within the wheat, it would absorb the environment and learn from the environment. And he also believed that you can plant all this wheat super close together, and that because they're all part of the same environment, they're going to be okay. So he refused to understand Darwinism, and that the wheat would compete, and then a bunch of it would die off. So anyways, he caused massive amounts of famine in the USSR in the early 30s, like absolutely unbelievable. So they did this, they did the farms where they would take over, and you would have to do a communal farm. And part of that, they juxtaposed onto that problem, which was already a big problem to begin with. Then they actually put on top of that Lysenko's theory of wheat, which was a disaster, killed millions. Like Lysenko has gone down in history as the scientist who's killed the most amount of people. So this is what happens, again, because Lysenko's theories were in line with the communist agenda, the communist ideology and thought process. So he was promoted, and it didn't matter if he was wrong. People outside the USSR were like, this dude is messed up, man. He doesn't understand a thing. He's so uneducated. It's baffling that he's even somebody in the USSR. So anyways, and okay, a third example of when this woman is my favorite communist. I love her story. I don't love communism, but I love her story. Her name is Elena Ceausescu. So I don't know if there's any Romanians in the chat, but shout out to Romania. You guys got the communists out of there. Bang up job. Perfect. Great. And I hope that the communists never return to your country. But Elena Ceausescu, she was the wife of the main dictator. And his name was, oh God, I forget his name. See, I don't care about him. I just care about Elena. But she didn't finish grade school, like the small, like I say grade school and I feel like it's the wrong thing. Grad school, no, grade school. I always get that wrong in English. Grade school, the little school for little kids. She didn't finish that. But she decided when she was the wife of the dictator in Romania, she decided she's going to become a scientist. And it didn't matter that she didn't know anything, but she appointed herself as a chemist. She was like, oh yeah, I'm a biochemist now, you know, give me the degrees, people. She had people write, so they had to come up with she had to have a doctoral thesis. So they actually had a bunch of scientists that were writing her PhD for her, and they put her name on it, but they wrote it. And the Gestapo or what are they called in the USSR? Anyways, in Romania, they were called the Securitate, the secret police of Romania. And of course, you know, the secret police guys were always in waiting for these scientists. And if the scientists would dissent in any way, you know, that guy and probably his whole family would be killed. So the scientists didn't have a choice. They wrote the doctoral thesis, and Elena went from that point on presenting it as her own. Of course, you were never allowed to ask her questions. And anyways, and she even got like honorary degrees from all sorts of other countries. Great Britain, I think, gave her like the Royal Chemistry, whatever. They gave her an honorary degree, which they were super mega embarrassed about. Can you imagine? You're England, right? Which is a powerful country. And you give a degree, which should be reserved for people who have scientific achievements, you give it to somebody that you find out after they're dead that they never actually even finished grade school. And they never did anything scientific. They would just walk around in a lab coat, take pictures, pretend that they were scientific. Elena was so delusional in that idea that she was a scientist that she even had a song. And these Romanians in school are actually listening to this song. They have to sing this song, and it's like about how she's the greatest scientist in the world. But this is what happens when the government gets involved into scientific matters. And what scares me about what's going on now for us is I see that every time you hear a public health officer or the main doctors, I can't remember their title right now, but the main doctors who are actually telling us how to do lockdowns for the next 10 years so that nobody can get sick of anything. Those guys, they're public health officials. And what that means is they're government workers. They're not there for science. They're not advancing science. They're there to take orders from the government. And this is why it's so dangerous that all of this, the measures, the vaccine, everything is in the hand of the government and is being funneled down through their representatives who are called doctors. And I'm not saying they're all corrupt, but I'm saying they're all paid to say what the government wants them to say. And this is why the outcome cannot be good. In order to push the government agenda on this today, they're doing the same thing they did in the USSR, and they are shutting down people who say things like that. So that doctor, Sherry Tepany, she's being shut down everywhere. A whole bunch of doctors, a whole bunch of nurses, doctors, scientists, virologists, immunologists, all coming out saying, maybe it's a little bit extreme what we're doing. Maybe we should take a step back and not force mass vaccination. All of those people systematically shut down because the government narrative has to be, you're in lockdown until you get the vaccine. And even when you get the vaccine, you still may not be able to go out, and you'll still have to wear a mask, and potentially two. And you still can't gather with your family because you're going to need the second dose of the vaccine, and then the third dose and the fourth dose. And it's going to become a yearly thing. So every year you're going to have to get your COVID shot. That's the end goal. That's what they're doing. And it's highly experimental, never done before. And I don't know. There's never been an outcome where government took over science and it ended up well for anybody. For anybody. In the short term, it's okay for the government and their workers, but in the long term, it fails for them too. And also, in the short term, it fails for the masses. So the gray masses, us, I am the gray masses, you are the gray masses. It fails immediately for us. Sure enough, this is what we're seeing, lockdowns, and we're being dragged around by politicians who have their health puppets telling us what to do. So it's just, it's a very sad thing. And this is when you realize or you understand that you are in a tyrannical environment. When you have a government that has taken over an entire branch of something, science or military, whatever, and they're collecting them. Like we have in Canada, all of the education has been collected by the government. All of the medicine has been collected by the government, the army, of course, and now the public health measures, all under the ban, the government, the road security and safety and things like that. All the government is saying, the government is telling us they have monopoly over all of that. And that's when you start to realize you are in a tyranny. And if they push the vaccine as a mandatory thing, completely going against Nuremberg law, what's it called? Les Accords de Nuremberg. Anyways, if you go against that and you're imposing on your population a vaccine, that's the next step to tyranny. That's when we're entering the very critically dangerous zone where there's almost no time to get out of. And that brings me to my next point. See that? Banging out the subjects tonight. Go ahead. Okay. The government cannot do all of this without their little minions, right? So they need minions, and they don't need a little bit of minions. They need a ton of minions everywhere. We all know in Canada that the army is not numerous enough. The country's too vast. So they need people on the ground to carry out their work. And that's what they're going to do. And it's important to understand how that happens. And if you guys are interested in reading this, I would recommend, and somebody had pointed it in the chat before, it's a book called Ordinary Men. And it's written by a historian called Christopher Browning. Yes, Christopher Browning. And he wrote a really easy to read book. It is a fantastic book. And if you want to understand how a normal guy can just wake up one day and go and do mass execution of Jewish villages, you read his book, because he has laid it out. And I'm going to give you just a little brief description of how it is that you get somebody from being a normal, functioning person all the way to being a killing machine. So Christopher Browning, he read the archives from the Reserve Police Battalion 101. Those are the archives he read. And also some Jewish survivors had their accounts in there. But it was mostly because these Reserve Police Battalion, a lot of them were still alive after the war, well into the 60s and 70s. And so they were interviewed by the governments that came after the Nazis. So basically, the biggest thing they did, the biggest thing to understand how it is that you can turn towards enforcing on your fellow human beings like absolute tyranny, is they're given a choice. So this is what happened to these guys in the 101 battalion. Normal guys, butchers, shoemakers, things like that. They had a choice. They didn't have to go and do the killings if they didn't want to. So they were presented with a choice. They were also the most unlikely people to become killers. So you think of your middle-aged 41-year-old neighbor, and you're like, he'll never do. Like, think again. He may very well become a marching order taker for the government. And I'm not trying I'm not trying to expose all of this to make people think, oh my gosh, like, let's turn on each other. I'm trying to make sure people understand how it is that the governments get there. How do they get to the tyranny? They can't do it alone. The government's not numerous enough. So anyways, I'm not trying to turn you against your neighbor. So go see your neighbor, Pete. If he's 41 years old, be nice to him, have a beer, chill. Like, don't think he's going to come kill you tomorrow. That's not what I'm trying to do. Okay. These guys who were in the police battalion were actually not brainwashed by the Nazis, which is another really important thing to understand. They came from a time before the Nazis. They were educated before. A lot of them were in World War I. They were not brainwashed by the Nazis. This is not Hitler Youth we're talking about. They also, it turns out, they were the least likely to have voted for Hitler. So they actually didn't vote for Hitler. And so yeah, 230 of them were indicted in the 60s, and they were asked to testify. And this is how we have so much information on how they got to become like killers, like death machines. There's a huge talk in his book about adaptive power. And the adaptive power is when the things you're doing that are so horrific become routine. So you go out to the forest, you shoot the Jewish children and moms, and you just justify it yourself. It just becomes routine. It's what you do. a lot of so about 20% of the people there were called evaders in that battalion. They were called evaders. They didn't want to shoot people. Then you want to see, they didn't, there's others that didn't want to be seen as weak, so they did the shooting anyways. So those are the most dangerous people, because on a good day they're normal and they're not killers, but because they're too afraid to speak up. And this is what scares me. So when I see things like simple things, like if you work somewhere and you're being told that you have to do a diversity training course, and within that diversity training course, you're being told that if you're white, you're automatically racist. If you don't speak up then, because you want to please the teacher, you don't want to offend your job, you don't want to offend your boss, and you're going to keep on going anyways as if nothing happened, you're almost in that same category. Now, you're not shooting people yet, but it's just the morality weakness, which is what I'm hoping people will turn and turn that around. When you realize you're in that position, that you maybe turn it around. I have to do the same. I have a diversity course coming up, and I'm going to have to take a deep breath and then expose why I disagree with it. And I hope I don't get fired, but who knows, right? And then the third category in that police battalion were the active shooters. Those are the dudes who act like crazy, just absolutely enjoy killing anyways. So they would have done it no matter what. So these killing squads, that's what they would do. They would go village to village. They would either be responsible for rounding them up and putting them on the trains, or actual shooting them in the forest. And a lot of them said that, so if you're the guy who's like driving the truck, the convoy to the train station, you have 25 Jews in the back of your truck, that person in their mind justified, well, I'm not the one shooting them. So, but they were still participating in the tyranny. They were enforcing it for the government. They participated. And they justified it to themselves by saying, well, I'm not the one pulling the trigger. So this is where it gets really dangerous, where you have all these people who are like, well, I'll help round up all of the people for the vaccine, but I'm not the one violating their bodies by forcing the vaccine on them. I'm just like rounding them. I'm just like taking names and making a list of it. This is the mentality that we're headed towards. So it's all about explaining away your responsibility, explaining away things so that it's not directly related to you, and you think in your mind you're justified. And this is what is happening now. This is why you have the mask enforcers. These guys were not even hired by the government, who come up to you in the grocery store and are like, you need to put your mask on. This is the mentality. This is the headspace they're in. They think they're so righteous. And when it comes time for the government to flip over the switch to say, okay, we need these police battalions, we need the vax enforcers, we need to know lists of everybody in every city that didn't get the vaccine, they're going to recruit those people who are willing to do it, or who think, well, I'm not the one giving the vaccine, so I'm okay, I'm just taking the names. That's how people are going to be sucked into this whole tyrannical enforcement system. It's a huge vacuum. It sucks you in, and once you're in, it's very hard to get out. So anyways, crazy times we're in. Hopefully you guys are good where you are. I'm going to check the chat a little bit. Yeah, Jesus loves all races. Yeah, and it's, you know what's really funny about that? And don't worry, I'm not going to get all religious on you guys, but I've said this in many videos in the past, but I have, my friends are like all sorts of races, mixed race. Like that's what happens when you're in Canada. Like, if you're in a major city or in a decently sized city in Canada, it's all people from all over the world, and the people around you are all different races. And these people, they tell me all the time, they're also offended by this whole race thing. The diversity training that people are going through, how their kids are being told in school. So I have a friend who's Black, and his friends are being told, his kids are being told in school that they're a victim. And my friend's going, but they're not a victim. They've not been oppressed. They're being taught in school to believe in their head that they're victimized by the society, by their white friends at school, which is completely false. And my friends, they all say the same thing. They all say, you know, it's Jesus before anything. So when you think of it that way, the race doesn't matter. it's all about what did Jesus say, what did he do? And so in those contexts, it's and that's what I find. I find it easier to be, for me, that it's easier for me to be friends with people who are same politically minded, who are not completely brainwashed, and who are more of the Catholic, the Christian, I should say, the Christian religion, because we all have that in common. So it doesn't matter the skin color, it doesn't matter. So anyways, okay. Whew, where am I? Where am I in this? I've gotten to Victor now. Oh, well, one last thing. I was talking about Romania. Let's keep going on that just for a little bit, because there's some interesting things from Romania. So it's not about Elena, my favorite communist, but this is an example of how opportunistic some tyrannical governments can be. And just like COVID was the opportunity for the Great Reset, so you guys have heard that before, this is not new. The World Health Organization as well as the World Economic Forum have now both come out saying this, that COVID is the perfect opportunity for the Great Reset. And what they're trying to do is use that to lay out new plans for finances and money redistribution against the world, across the world, and immigration issues and all that things that have nothing to do with the disease. But they're like, oh, wait, there's a disease? How do we use that to our advantage? And basically they came up, okay, we tried the climate change thing, it didn't work. Let's use this disease as our way to sneak in the Great Reset. So this is not new. Romania, you guys in Romania, your dictators did this to you in 77. So there was an earthquake in March in Bucharest, and it destroyed a large part of the city. And the dictators, the communists in Romania, use it as a pretext to rebuild Bucharest in their image. So in that mentality, you have to say, okay, how are we going to feed this to the Romanians? How are we going to convince the Romanians that what we really want to do is wipe out all the buildings that are pre-communist era and just rebuild with communist buildings? So people kind of forget about what it was life before communism and they just accept it easier. So they sold it to the Romanians as, oh, we're going to rebuild to safeguard better against future earthquakes. So that was a complete lie, 100% lie. What they did is they destroyed all the historical monuments they wanted to. They wiped out the memory. They destroyed churches, because you know how communists feel about religion. So they started destroying churches. There's a couple stories of people trying to save their churches, and they even took one church. They literally lifted the whole thing out of ground and they moved it out of that area so that the commies wouldn't come and destroy it. And they would also destroy people's homes. So if you were living in a home that wasn't in the image of what commies wanted, they would come to you and say, okay, we're going to take your home, we're going to destroy it, pack your stuff and leave. And if you didn't do it, they would shut off your electricity, and then they would shut off your water. And if you're still not out, they would literally come while you're in your house and destroy your roof. So then you have the next rainstorm, you have water just pouring in, like it just wrecks your whole house. And then they're like, look, your house is wrecked, we have to tear it down, obviously. So that is just another opportunity. This has not been the first time that the governments are using a completely unrelated event to pass in something else that they want to do. So anyways, okay, I thought that was a apropos example, because it's directly exactly what's happening here. Okay, so here's the crazy thing. I have some notes here. We're going to turn to Victor now. So, okay, I was reading at 2 a.m. the other day, and the only paper I had near me for notes was this thing. So half my notes on 1942 are here, and the other half are here. So squirrel brain, I know. Okay, so let's get to the book here. We're in the second one, guys. This is a big boy, a big one. This is the hardcover, the second one, and it's for 1942 to 1945, and it's long. I forgot how long it was. I had read this at the like about a year ago, and I forgot how long it was, because it's every year it's like 1/3 of the book. The other book we got through like 10 years very quickly. This one is far longer, but anyways, okay. So, oh, I just bumped up my whole screen. There's an earthquake. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So the 1942 we know at this point, Victor, oh, by the way, it's I Will Bear Witness. Victor is out of his house. He's been out of his house for a year. He is living in what's called a Jew house, is where they kicked all the Jews out of their homes to give to Nazi party members, and then they put the Jewish people in these apartment blocks where you would get a room, and then you'd share a kitchen and everything else. So a couple more decrees, and it becomes really, really bad for the Jews. So until then, if you're a Jew, you can walk in the streets and not be too harassed. It was like only a few words here and there. But now, 1942, it just becomes constant onslaught, to the point where the Jewish people admit to not wanting to go out. They had to have the star sewn onto their jacket, and it had to be sewn on. And when they would walk in the street, the Gestapo would like literally check the star, making sure it was sewn on real hard so that you couldn't just easily take it away if you wanted to pretend you weren't Jewish. And so they would check that. And then, of course, they would just trip you in the streets. The kids would spit on you. Like, you couldn't go anywhere. It's just absolutely horrific. And all the stores, all the restaurants, everybody has basically said no Jews allowed. So you can't. And 1942 is also a horrible year for all Germans. It is a famine year. And even Joseph Goebbels wrote a diary. We recovered the first part of the year of his diary. The rest was lost, they think, in one of the bombings. But the first part was recovered. And Goebbels is going, this famine across Germany is not good. And they're trying to bring in food from all these other places that they're taking over, but there's not enough food being brought back in. So there's like ration cards. The rations are steeper every week. It's getting worse. And of course, if you're Jew, then you're told, oh, well, sorry, but your ration's going to go to an Aryan, so tough luck, right? It's just completely horrific what's happening. So no shaving soaps anymore for Jews. Jews are not allowed to go to the barber shop anymore. So Victor talks about how, because of those decrees, because you can't have soap for shaving, if you appear too clean shaven, you get stopped by the Gestapo as a Jew, because they're like, well, how come you're getting soap? Where's your soap? And then that will prompt a house search. So they have to be careful to toe the line. It's exactly what happened in the Ukraine. I did another video like 2 years ago about the big famine in Ukraine in the winter of 33. And what was happening is some of the peasants had managed to hide grain, bread, flour, whatever. They would hide it, and they weren't found initially when they were searching people's homes. But these people, if they ate and they didn't look skinny enough like their neighbors, they were arrested, and they were searched again, and their houses were burned down. Like, how come you're not as skinny as the other one? So yeah, if you manage to store some food, how do you eat it and still remain skinny enough? Like, this is the thing. It's just absolutely horrible all around. The dentists are refusing cosmetic treatment. This is not just for Jewish people. This is just because they're needed in the army. So the medical doctors are all at the hospitals taking care of wounded war veterans. And the dentists are also helping at the front. So there's a shortage of those kinds of things. But yet, the Jewish doctors and the Jewish dentists are out there sweeping streets or shoveling snow. So can you imagine living in that world? Like, how full of hatred do you have to be that you would rather not get treatment from a Jewish doctor because he's a Jew? You'd rather just not get treatment than seek treatment for your pain. Like, and I'm sure, I think about these things a lot, and I'm sure that there was a whole bunch of underground agreements. Like, there's always good people everywhere you go. And I am sure that there was like all these Germans who are like completely appalled by the Nazis, and they were still supporting their Jewish neighbors as much as they could. And if they knew their Jewish neighbor was a doctor, I'm sure a bunch of people would secretly go and see that doctor. Everybody's life is in danger at that point, because if that gets found out. But I'm sure that kind of thing happens. So Victor does report that he sees all these doctors, Jewish doctors, out of a job, essentially, while the Germans are suffering. And it's just ridiculous. So Victor is also shoveling snow. And as long as you work or appear to be working, shoveling the snow, you don't get reported to the Gestapo. So they took like 70-year-old Jewish men and they're like, all right, go shovel the snow for 10 hours today. And of course, these guys can't do it. So the other guys around them would try to find ways to make it look like they were working when they could in fact rest. So there's all these like camaraderie things that they're trying to do to kind of survive together. He reports that in his book. 90% of the conversations amongst Jews at this point were about house searches. So that's like, if you think, okay, the Jews that are not deported to camps yet, they're still in the cities in Germany. What is it they're talking about, right? Because they don't know the news. They don't know what's going on at the war front. They just hear Germany's doing super well, and very rarely they'll hear anything else. So they talk about the house searches. And sadly as well, there's a lot of suicides that are starting that year. So, and it's so bad that when there are multiple house searches, you'll get house searched a few times. And while the Gestapo is searching your house, they will look at you and say, how come you didn't kill yourself yet? And there's even a story in his book about a Gestapo officer actually showing a Jewish family how to do a noose so they could all commit suicide. And they're like joking about it. Like, you just kill yourself, dude. Like, appalling situation to be in at that point. So they're constant fear. Victor, who's married to Ava, Ava's going and doing all the shopping because she's not a Jewish, she's non-Jewish, so she can go out without the star and she doesn't get harassed in the street for now. The April 1942, the Jewish stars are required to be on all Jewish homes now. So it just keeps escalating, right? You start with one thing and it's saying, like, we're not in 1942 now. We could very well go there in the next year, but it's this small thing. So it starts with a small thing, then it's another one. Is just 2 weeks to flatten occurs, just 2 weeks, guys, let's do this. We're all in this together. And then it becomes a year. And oh, just wear one mask. Oh no, now you have to wear two. Oh, it's okay. When you get the vaccine, it'll all be okay. And then after that, oh my gosh, no, you're gonna need still to wear the mask. Then like it's these little things that keep escalating this, just absolutely crazy, because you don't see it until you're able to step back and take a whole view of how these escalations happened. And then you understand we went from here to this complete totalitarian system in the span of a year. And that's what we're doing. That's exactly what we did. Okay, let me just catch up with the chat. I saw somebody say, hello from Montreal. Elias, you guys had your, I'm going to put that in here. You guys had a big protest down there in Montreal this week, eh? Didn't you? It was on Sunday. We saw that. Of course, they painted people as kind of jerks for going protesting, and apparently they gave a whole bunch of tickets to people that were not wearing masks. But anyways, political foolishness. Hello, you're always here. I love that you're always here. Thanks for showing up in the stream, buddy. Who else have I missed? Linda. Oh, happy St. Patty's to you too. Yeah, just absolutely crazy things that are happening right now. Okay. Yeah, a tattoo for the vaccine. Yeah, and that's Ian. That's true. Here, this is what I'm going to put this on here. What Ian is saying is exactly right. That there is a very real danger that if you refuse the vaccine, the non-vaxxed people will become a category in society that is regarded in the same way as the Jewish people were. So they had a campaign to say Jewish people are dirty, they're gross, they look like rats, they have big noses. Like, these were all tips that were used by the Nazis to try to put out there that the Jewish people were just gross. They played on disgust a lot, right? So Jewish people are gross. That's not me saying that. Don't go clip that, people. The jihadis are going to clip that. They're going to cancel me. But no, this is what the Nazis used to say. They used to say the Jewish people are dirty, so they would evoke in you a disgusting feeling when you would see a Jew in public. And it's easier to discard them when you don't view them as human, when you think they're gross. And there's the medical tyranny that's coming our way, there is a real possibility that if you have the vaccine, you don't have the vaccine, you will be viewed as a danger to society. You're that guy that wants to kill people by not getting vaccinated. Why don't you just get vaccinated? And then it could very well degrade into like, oh, you're so disgusting, you were never vaccinated. And that's when it opens up the door for people to spit on you on the street, torment you and all that. And that's if the government isn't starting to round you up at the same time. So it's a very real possibility that we're facing right now. Okay, so just a little bit more about Victor, and then I'm going to let you guys go. The Jews no longer allowed in restaurants. May 1942, the newest decree is that anyone, this is the saddest one for Victor, one of the saddest ones. So Jews or anyone living with them are forbidden to have pets. So remember I told you they're coming for his cat? But that decree also said that it's forbidden to give animals away to be looked after. So there's only one option, and that is you have to either kill your own pet or wait for the Gestapo to come and grab your pet, right? It's so, you know how they love their cat. They had a cat, his name was Michel, and they've had him for 11 years at this point. And they through the starvation, Victor was giving his portion of meat at the start to Michel so the cat wouldn't go hungry. And they had to do it. So basically, on May 19th is when they actually took their cat to a vet who was able to give him a shot to put him to sleep. And that's what they did, because they wanted that rather than the Gestapo rounding up their pets, and who knows what the Gestapo would have done with it. Probably like put them all in a fire pit. Like, I don't think the Gestapo had time for this, and they didn't care, because these were not Nazi cats, these were Jewish cats or animals. It's like cats, dogs, birds, like rabbits, anything that people would have as a pet in their house. And we knew about that because a few years before that, remember I told you guys in 1935, I think it was, before the Olympics, they had the Nazi Cat Association. They literally had an association for Nazi pets. So you went from that to now non-Jewish, the Jewish people cannot have it. And even if you're living with somebody who's non-Jewish, that person can't have the cat either, but you can't give it away. Like, imagine the scenario. So yeah, they put their cat down. During the house arrests now, sorry, not the house arrest, when people are going, their houses are being searched by the Gestapo. The Gestapo is now more and more violent with people. And Ava, who's not even Jewish, now she's also getting the beatings. So she's being spit on. She's getting slapped around. They're insulting her. They're telling her, why are you still married to a Jew? And they're trying to humiliate her as much as possible. So they're beating everybody in the house searches now. So while they're searching a house, they don't just search the house. It's really a house trashing in 1942. It used to be a house search, which was much more polite, even though it was annoying. Now it's a house trashing, and they'll trash everything. If you're elderly and they find medicine in your cabinet, they're going to take all of the medicine away from you. Of course, it's wartime. You're not going to get any new medicine. So tough luck. If you have something like arthritis, you're on your own, dude. So this is what they did. And a lot of people were being arrested and put in local jails. So they had jails around the cities there. And how people would know somebody was deported to a concentration camp directly from jail is every day somebody from the family would have to go and bring fresh underwear for the prisoner. So if you went one day and the front desk didn't give you dirty underwear, because you had to do the laundry for the prisoner. It's not like the prison did it. So the people would bring fresh laundry. If you would be getting back in return dirty laundry, you knew that your person was still alive and still in jail. If you got nothing back, that was a signal to you that the person has been either killed on the spot or deported to a concentration camp. They're starting to hear more and more about concentration camps. So he mentions Buchenwald in this one in 1942. And he says that they're starting to get letters back from concentration camps. So people who are in concentration camps are now, we know what happens. Historically now we know they're being rounded up and killed often, or they're being put to work in appalling conditions, by the way. So the officials, at this point, the killing machine that is the Nazis is not amped up to level 100. They're still probably around level like 30 at this point, and they're still trying to figure out how to kill the Jews, so it's not going fast yet. They're still doing the Zyklon B, but in trucks. You know how they were putting people in trucks at first, and then they developed Zyklon B for the showers at the concentration camps, and that's when it opens up like the mass killings. That's when it really became the final solution. We're not there yet in 1942, but they are killing people by firing squad or by the truck killings at the concentration camps, where people are starving. So what the concentration camp directors are doing is they're sending letters back home, and they're saying to people, oh, that person got shot because he was trying to escape. And people knew that was kind of a lie, because they were saying that about people who are like 70 years old. And they were like, as if my grandpa, 70 years old, tried to escape. Like, that's not true in any way. So Victor actually ends up calling this undisguised murders. So when they're not even trying anymore, they're like, oh, we shot him because he's trying to escape. It's an undisguised murder. And 1942 is also, so because the house searches are so intense and frequent, this is the time where Victor, who, remember, was hiding his diary pages inside of his folders from academia, well, now Ava is starting to sneak them out of the house, and they're hiding them somewhere else. So this is how his diary survived and how we have it today. And we are able to read this. And his diary is especially important in understanding how small steps is how you get there. It's tiny steps, and you don't even realize that you're in the middle of that when you're in it. So this is why his book is so critically important, especially in a time like right now, where we're going through a similar thing with the medical tyranny, and it's been the small steps. And people keep thinking, if I just comply at this one, if I do the third lockdown, if I take the vaccine, I'll be okay. I'll be able to go back to work. I'll be able to go back and get my social life again. But in reality, the end game is that reset. The end game is not curing COVID or getting you better. It's how do we implement as much as possible Agenda 2030 on as many people as possible. And we know that part of Agenda 2030 is to kill a lot of people. So I don't know how that's going to go, but we'll see. As more and more people decide to take the vaccine without realizing what it is, we're going to see what's happening with that. So, and keep in mind that the COVID, I can't even get through an hour without my throat giving away. But if you look at how it was all started with the flatten the curve, and then we'll get back to normal soon. We'll get back to normal soon. And then they switched in the Great Reset. They added it in. Where did that come out of, right? It was the plan all along. So they didn't know when COVID hit, but as soon as they discovered they could use it, that's when this talks about the Great Reset came about. And then even our own Prime Minister Trudeau has actually announced it. And I think he thought it would go better than it did. I think a lot of people did freak out when they heard about the Great Reset, and that's gained in popularity. People are starting to see, but we're going to see there's going to be more of this coming. And I really hope we don't go that way. I hope that people don't get vaccinated, or not enough people get vaccinated, and then the government starts to say forced vaccination, and that is the thing that will make people stand up. I hope so. Montreal, you guys have stood up this week. Good on you for protesting. But yeah, it's I just really hope that we're not going down that same path. So far, we are, but no. So now it's the third lockdown. Is it going to be a final lockdown, like a fourth? Like how many times are we going to go down this? So anyways, okay. So that's about it. Just to wrap it up today, We saw that the scientists, when they get taken over by government, similar to what's happening right now, it never ends up well for anybody. When normal people, ordinary men, which is the title of the book, when these guys are just going around starting to enforce the tyrannical rules, that's another sign that things aren't going very well for a democratic society, a society that likes freedom. And as we saw with Victor this week, if we keep going down this route, we will end up with a class in society, a medical class called non-vaccinated, whatever they're going to be called in the future. And that class is at very real risk of being attacked similarly to the way the Jews were attacked in the 40s. So there we go. There we have it, guys. Thank you so much to everybody for joining today. Sorry about the technical issues at the start. We will always come back. I will always get this stream back on. So it was a lot of fun. I didn't get quite as upset as last week, so maybe that's better. I was more chilled out this time. But yeah, thank you again for joining. I'll see everybody next week, and have a good week till then. Kisses to everybody, and cheers. Oh, happy St. Paddy's Day. Bye, everyone.